Podcasting to you from the beautiful Pacific Northwest, I'm your host, Brad Johnson. Welcome to The Theory of Wine. In today's podcast, we chat with Walla Walla wine expert Drew Pauk, who's a certified wine specialist, certified wine educator, and certified sommelier, and student of enology and viticulture. We're going to dive deep into wine. We're going to talk about wine education, and we're going to share some very interesting tips with you. Stick around. Support for this podcast comes from the new documentary film, Wine Diamonds, Uncorking America's Heartland, streaming now at winediamondsfilm.com and from wineryboost.com, influence marketing for the wine industry. My guest, Drew Pauk, is a Missouri transplant to Washington and is a certified sommelier, wine educator, and an enology and viticulture student and works part-time at Savaya Cellars. Drew found his way into the wine world in 2011 after a trip to Woodinville, Washington. Then, his passion for wine knowledge exploded and dove deep into the subject. Since then, he's earned many credentials. Certified Wine Specialist 2014, earned his entry-level sommelier course in 2015, Certified Wine Educator 2016, and again in 2016, Certified Sommelier. In 2017, Drew and his wife made the move to Walla Walla with the goal of opening their own winery. Drew graduates from the Walla Walla Community College's Enology and Viticulture program in June and is planning to make his own wine this fall and get the wheels turning on his own label. Drew Pauk, welcome to The Theory of Wine.
Yeah, great. You did great. Good intro. Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. You know, we I think we connected on Twitter, so we've never met before today, and this is one of the beauty things about Twitter and the social media world.
Yeah, modern day podcast. You're exactly right. It makes it easy with some of this technology. So
yeah,
glad to do it.
So I reached out to the wine world, people that I follow and people that are in my little orbit here, and asked for somebody that has maybe some recent credentials in sommelier and some of these wine education world circles. And I'm kind of curious about, first of all, maybe what's your story, how you found your way to Walla Walla, and where are you at this point in life? How'd you get here?
Yeah, good question. It's kind of funny. So my wife and I kind of got into wine, like you said, back in 2011. She was into it. I was not. I was more beer, bourbon
right.
guy. And then, I kind of got into it. She studied school. One of her rotations for school was up here in Seattle, nearby where we are. Mm-hmm. And I went and visited her, and she's like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to some wineries? I'm like, I don't know. Not really. Well, she booked it anyway. So we went, and I remember being like, oh my God, this is amazing. I remember one of the tasting rooms, like, okay, take the glass, swirl it or smell it, then swirl it, and then smell it again. I'm like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. It just kind of opened my eyes. So from there, again, that's going back 2010, 11-ish. From there, I just kind of became very intrigued with the topic. I started reading more books about it, trying different things. But my wife and I didn't have any kids at the time, so we would travel a lot, travel to different wine regions. That was kind of what we did. And I worked in grocery stores back in St. Louis. And some of the distributors, some of the reps, some of the vendors, even some of the party center managers, the liquor managers had some of these certifications. So I would ask them about it. How was the test? How was it? Was it easy? And they're like, oh no, you gotta study a lot. So that's kind of where I got into it. From there, I remember telling my wife, I'm like, I played sports all my life. And then I'm like, this kind of reminds me, taking these tests again, reminded me of like being at a game or having something to look forward to or preparing. So that's kind of where I got. So long and short, I did the CSW through Society of Wine Educators. I kind of got into the SOM thing, the intro SOM and the certified SOM, like you said. And then I did the Certified Wine Educator, another certification through the Society of Wine Educators. And then from there, that was 2016, 15, 16-ish. And then my wife and I made a trip to Walla Walla. It's just like a vacation. We're like, oh, this is a cool little town. It's kind of like a still cool wine region, growing, but still like in its infancy. It doesn't have huge barriers to entry by any means. And so we kind of went back and forth, like, well, should we do this? We kind of joked, like, oh, maybe when we retire. And I'm like, well, that's forever away. Why don't we just try to do it now? So that's kind of where we're at now. We moved up here last May of 17, and I enrolled, like you said, in the enology and viticulture program here. So I'm learning a ton about just winemaking, the viticulture side, plants, all those things. And I'll graduate, like you said, again in June, and then from there, hopefully open our own, winery, start our label, get everything going. It's probably a 2-year, 3-year process to get the wheels churning, but that's our plan. We're still heading down that path yet, so that's kind of where we're at. Hopefully, that was a good synopsis of everything.
Yeah, that's fast. That's terribly fascinating, and I totally get the kind of diving in, go total wine geek and learning all this stuff. So let's kind of rewind a little bit. Let's talk about some of the first credentials you got, and then maybe kind of compare and contrast. Like, so I'm somebody listening to the program right now, and I'm interested about wine. I want to know a little bit more. Maybe not jump in all the way, but maybe test the waters out. What would you recommend as a good first step for folks like that?
Yeah, so my first step was the CSW. I think that's a good first step. And again, that is called the Certified Specialist of Wine. That's that certification. And it's through an organization based out of DC called Society of Wine Educators. Mm-hmm. I think that they have a website, societyofwineeducators.com. It's easy to look up. Mm-hmm. In my world, that was a good first step. However, if I had to do it again, I probably would have done the intro to Somm first. So that's, for the sommelier, a lot of people have seen the movies and what have you. There's 4 steps: intro, certified, advanced, and then the very coveted masters.
Right.
So it's very good. It's a 2-day course, and my wife and I both did it. And there's people there from all different, levels of knowledge, but they really walk you through. And it's very much, there is a test at the end. I think most people do pass it. I think they want people to pass it. They kind of are walking you along, but they really kind of open your eyes to the world of wine, and you do a lot of tasting with it. So if I had to do it again, I probably would have done that one first. Because what I did first was a Certified Specialist of Wine, which is just a multiple choice theory exam.
Okay.
It's quite difficult, 100 questions. You got to get 75 correct to pass.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I both took it, and luckily we both passed. And so that was kind of it. But then we were kind of on our own doing it, looking at books, trying to do different tasting, because I do think, when you're learning about, Brunello di Montalcino, it does help to look at a map, taste some wine, read about it, learn about the grapes, learn about the yeast, and taste as you go. So we were kind of on our own, but luckily we both got through it.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that's that. Then once you back to the Somm thing, once you do your intro, then you can sit for your certified exam. The certified exam is, again, if people have seen the movies, it's 3 parts: the theory and the service. Not nearly as difficult nor as complex, but still a difficult test. Where we did the theory first, and then tasting from there was just 2 wines. Mm-hmm. You had your service. And for me personally, I had never really worked in a restaurant. So service was the most difficult portion for me. Just like one thing for the listeners is you walk up, and they kind of instruct you through this for the service, but you walk in, there might be a table of 7 empty chairs, but 1 chair is the master sommelier. Mm-hmm. And he or she says, okay, I'm here with my husband and my kids, and my grandpa's over here, and what you're meant to do is memorize the order of who is where and where the males and the females are, because proper service, you should always serve the female guests first and then the male. So it's an invisible table, but you are kind of thinking and churning, like, oh shoot, where's grandma sitting? I forgot where grandma's sitting, because I want to make sure I pour her the sparkling wine before I pour grandpa or what have you. So that was probably the hardest part for me, was the service, just because I had never really been through that routine before. I'm sure people who work in restaurants, that might be the easiest thing for them, and theory could be the most difficult for them. Mm-hmm. So that was that. You find your results out that day, which is fun, and so I passed, and you get champagne toast, and you kind of congratulate everyone who had passed, and it's it's a kind of a neat experience to pass.
Okay.
That way. So yeah.
So when you were doing the wine tasting part of that test, was it a blind tasting? You had to identify the grape and the region and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, exactly. So we had 2 glasses, a white and a red. I think, if I remember correctly, it was a German Riesling and then like a red Bordeaux blend. I could be wrong, because they don't really tell you. But what you do is you kind of go through a grid. Mm-hmm. And again, I keep referring to the movies. I just think that those movies, some movies are really good. It's not orally. You're not speaking to somebody. You're writing it down. So you're writing the color, you're writing down the hue. I think it's golden yellow. You're writing down where you think the alcohol is, the sugar, the structure, and then you're kind of going into some of the aromas, some of the characteristics that you taste or smell, and hopefully you build. I think what they look for mostly too is you build a good foundation of your theory to make sense with your final wine.
Mm-hmm.
If you're saying, for the listeners, if you're saying, oh, this has a lot of sugar and no oak, I think it's a California Chardonnay, that your theory is kind of wonky, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But if you're kind of building a good case for your wine, I think that's what they're looking for, to make sure you understand the tasting. I don't think you have to get the wine exactly right to pass. I don't think. But that's kind of, where you're at. There's kind of the structure, kind of the is there oak on the wine? You're kind of going down, but they have a sheet for you that you're filling out, you're writing down, smelling while tasting, and then you kind of turn that in, and then you get results back, and they just say, did great job, pass, or needs help, or what have you. They don't necessarily tell you what the wines are. Right, yeah.
So what was the most I guess you said the service part was the most challenging part for you. So when you were studying for all these, starting for your specialist and then working towards your SOM stuff, I mean, it gets expensive doing this. So, I mean, how do you do this on the cheap?
Yeah, you're exactly right. You hit the nail on the head, because it's expensive two ways. First and foremost, the exams are not cheap. There's a fee, couple $100 here or there. I was fortunate. I lived in St. Louis at the time, and the exam was in St. Louis, so I didn't have to do traveling. But some of my other exams, I had to go to Kentucky or Chicago, because you just can't. It is where it is. You got to go to it. So you got some of that travel expense, and then, like you said, all the wine that you're tasting, the books and what have you. So to do it on the cheap is difficult. I recommend, if you work in a restaurant or what have you, you're constantly picking back on some of those wines. You can taste it, try those, because I do think deep down, probably tasting is the most expensive portion of the exam.
Right.
Doing it on the cheap is tricky. My wife and I would kind of split a bottle. We'd have some friends over and say, hey, can you guys bring a couple bottles? And my dad's a big wine drinker as well, so just trying to piggyback with some of the others to kind of spread the cost across multiple people, because if you got a bottle, you can get five glasses really, but a good number of tastings through. So that would kind of be the best. You kind of got to have a group, some peers that are going through the same thing, where you can really kind of spread that cost spread it out a little bit.
So is there so I'm going for my certified wine specialist credential. Is there like a training guide or a thing that recommended suggestions on how you attack this thing?
Yeah. So the CSW Certified Specialist of Wine is they have a study guide, and they have recommended readings for you to do. Okay, so that's really good. And if if you get their study guide, I think they say every single question is buried somewhere in that book. I think that they kind of make that claim. So if you read the book and memorize it front to back, you should be okay. That's a daunting task, but it could be done. So they kind of have that going for you, with some recommended readings of different books, the Wine Bible, Wine Atlas, things like that. The Certified Wine Educator. So again, the Certified Specialist of Wine is, I don't want to say entry level, because it's a very difficult test, but then the Certified Wine Educator is a step above. The prerequisite is the Certified Specialist of Wine.
Okay.
So it's almost kind of like the SOM. You got intro, certified, advanced. You can't just jump and say, well, I'm going to take the master exam. No, that's not how it you can't, with the Society of Wine Educators, you can't just jump and take the Certified Wine Educator test. You have to pass the Certified Specialist of Wine test first.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And if you want, I can talk a little bit about the Certified Wine Educator test, because it's a little bit different. I found that one to be my most difficult. If you want me to kind of go through that.
Yeah, please.
So that one is kind of 7 parts. There's multiple choice, and then an essay. The essay is really hard, because you have an essay question and you have an hour to write an essay, and I had to handwrite it. And I literally practiced. My wife would give me questions and I would practice, because like literally your hand, it's been a long time. It's been like school, grade school since I've written that much. And I remember writing like, oh my God, my hand is like cramping up. I had like those little muscles in my hand cramping up. So again, there's the multiple choice, which is quite difficult, an essay question. Like I remember my essay question was, I believe it was like moving west to east, go through the white wine regions of the Loire Valley, something like that, So then you kind of have to get your theory together and say, okay, I'm going to start over here and move this way and talk about the wines. And you want a good introduction, good conclusion. You want to have a good structured good structured essay. Then there's a tasting portion, which you have 8 glasses of wine in front of you, 4 whites, 4 reds. And what they do is they give you 10 options. So again, you got 8 glasses in front of you and 10 options.
Okay.
So there's a dummy option in there. And it almost makes it like, I practiced a lot, and I was like, I don't even want to look at that, because then you kind of can trip yourself up. But you have to hit those wines. So let's say there's four whites: a German Riesling, a Burgundy, Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, and we already said Chardonnay. I don't know, a Bordeaux blend with maybe a little bit of oak on it or something. So you got to hit all those. You can get 2 wrong, so you can get 6 out of 8 and still pass.
Okay.
Part 2 of that is then the instructor will identify 1 wine, and you have to go through kind of like the Somm thing. You have to go through a grid and really dive in deep into what you taste and smell in that wine.
Okay.
Then from there, you also have a fault test. So the fault test is you have 8, 9, I think 8 glasses of Pinot Grigio in front of you. They all look the same, and they're all altered a little bit. So one of them has a little bit more acid. One of them has a little bit more tannin. One of them has a little bit more alcohol. One of them has a little bit of sugar. One of them has some certain flaws, some VA. So you have to go through, and there's a neutral one in there too. So you have to go through and try to pick out those. That was quite difficult, but it's a fun exercise to do. Right. But that one's quite difficult too. So that's kind of like the 5 main parts of the day exam. So you take all those parts in one day. And luckily for me, I got through them all. Once you pass all those, you have to give a presentation, because the certification is called a wine educator. So they really want to see how you talk to people, how you relate to people. Can you hold together a class? Can you teach people about, high level stuff and very low level stuff? Like, what makes a red wine red, and, the wines of Bordeaux. So can you kind of talk about all of those aspects, and you have to film it and send it in. So I did mine on Cab Franc. I had a group of friends and family members, and they had to record it, and I talked about Cab Franc, so then you send that in, and hopefully you pass that. Once you pass that, then the last thing, which is kind of the easiest thing, is you just have to go through your state certification. Like in Missouri, it was called the SMART certification, basically saying that you can serve alcohol to people, when people are had too much or what have you. I think each individual state, I had to do it up here in Washington too. Right. Each individual state kind of has their thing. So that's the last part. So that's kind of the certified wine educator exam in a big nutshell, I guess.
That's crazy. So, I mean, I had flashbacks as you're talking about this stuff. So I was doing my wine credential stuff at a community college in Iowa. So the instructor there had taught around the world, came back home to the Midwest. He was from Missouri. Oh, wow. Okay. Went to Iowa Des Moines Area Community College, started a program there. He's now the program manager at Napa Valley Community College, Paul Gospodarczyk. So he would take us through this process of learning wine science, but also taking us through basically the intro Somm stuff. So we would, like one of our final things, where we were brought into a room not knowing that we were being tested like you would be, blindly in front of a panel of other Somms. Like, you learn, when you're in wine school, you learn about not only what good wine is, but bad wine, right? About the fault. So he described it as kind of having an angry relationship with wine. So, because maybe sometimes you're looking for the faults rather than looking for the love. I mean, how do you, when you're at that level that you are, how do you kind of like not do shields up, but to allow the goodness of the wine to come to you, if that makes sense?
So are you talking about like in terms of like when there's something that maybe I don't like, or are faults or flaws? I
mean, my guess is more of like, how's your approach to wine? Do you go in with a happy mind or the critical mind? We'll be back in a moment with the final half of our interview with wine expert Drew Pauk. Hey wine friends, each week the Theory of Wine will bring you interesting content from winemakers, wine growers, wine rebels, writers and bloggers, and serious wine nerds from around the world. Want to join us? Connect with us at theoryofwine.com, on Facebook or Twitter. Cheers, friends. Welcome back to the second half of our interview with wine expert Drew Pauk, as we discuss how he approaches a wine tasting, interesting thoughts and tips on wine education, and plans for his upcoming winery.
I guess a little bit of both. Let me let me see if I can answer. Like a lot of times when I drink wine, I'm drinking with my wife, and it's for dinner. So from there, I love trying to figure out, what food should we go with, So that's kind of there. And then we are always judgmental of wines. I think everybody is. And I always play this game where I kind of look at price point and I'm like, okay, is it worth this $30? Is it worth this $20? Oh, this is a $12 bottle. This is a great buy. This is like if I had to pay $50 for this, I might be a little bit upset. Right. But yeah, and I do think that I hopefully have a good enough, train where I know when something is, because I do think a lot of times people don't like wines, and that's fine, but they think it's flawed, or you hear like, oh, that was corked. I'm like, I don't think it was actually corked. It might just not have been, in your style or what have you. So then I always try to, assess to, was it actually flawed? Because that's one thing that winemakers hate, is if a flawed bottle gets to somebody and then, it could be winery ABC and consumer opens it and they're like, oh, winery ABC is garbage. I didn't like that. And, it's a shame when that's, actually something went wrong with the cork or with the storage or whatever. And it kind of hurts the brand a little bit. So that's kind of, I guess, where I kind of drink what I think about and kind of go from there. I also am, I always think that for me as a taster, I'm not really that big on identifying all these different aromas. Especially now going through, a lot of the wine school, for me, a lot of it is like structure. How is it balanced? Where's the tannins? Is there a little bit of burn? Is there too much, ethanol in here? Or where's the acidity? Or so now especially with the past year and a half with some of my ongoing education, it's more structure of wine. How is this thing built, and what was the winemaker, he or she, what were they trying to do, and trying to analyze it that way? Was at work the other day we were drinking, and he's like, and one of my coworkers like, I think there's a lot of stems on this. I'm like, yeah, it does taste, I think it didn't say on the bottle, and it was a Barbera from Italy. I'm like, I guess they could use stems. It kind of had that taste, but kind of more that structure is kind of where I find myself gravitating towards now.
I'm gonna ask you a question, because you just said there's stems in it. So what would I be tasting for if I have a Barbera or whatever wine? I mean, you say you taste some stems. What does that taste like?
Yeah, first off, I think there might be a little bit of a greenness on the smell. So you might get a little bit of that olive, some of that green type of flavors. Some of that might jump through. And then for me, I feel like the stem tannins sometimes hit me on my tongue, like right down the middle, versus maybe like Merlot tannin, something that might be like all over my mouth. For like sometimes stems, even like with Syrah, sometimes I feel like I'm like, man, I get this stem thing, this tannin right down the middle of my tongue. Again, it's very much perception, but that's kind of what I would look for, is the greenness on the aromas and the palate, and then maybe like that strip out on your tongue. At least for me, that's kind of a way that I seem to pick it up, at least.
That's interesting. So is that an intention on the winemaker part, or is that just an artifact of the crush to stem process and fermenting?
Yeah, probably a winemaker decision more times than not. Like I know where we work, our winemaker, Rich, he might say, let's just, for example, let's say he comes with 4 bins of Syrah. And he said, oh, let's do 25% stems. Okay, great. So what we would do, we got 4 bins. We would foot stomp one of the bins. Then we would keep those stems with them. The other 3 bins, we would run through the crusher and destemmer. And so we would just get, whole berries out. Right. And then we would eventually mix all those together. So now we got 25% stems. Yeah, what you can do, like you mentioned, a crusher destemmer, just for everybody. Basically, you put all the grapes. They literally are grapes, and they come through and they go through this machine, and the stems come out one side and the grapes come out the other. You can take those stems and throw them back in if you want it. I've talked to our winemaker about that, and he said that he doesn't like doing that because there's a lot of just call it trauma, I guess, from going through the machine, that you almost get an elevated level of, I believe it's catechin. Catechin is like stem tannin and seed tannin. He said you get more seed, more of that catechin in the wine than you may want. Where a foot stomp is more gentle process than what goes through the machine. So yeah, hopefully answer your question. If you want to do a little bit of stems, like I know at work where I am, Rich might say, let's do 25% stems. Cool. Let's find out how much we got. Get 25%, foot stomp it. There's our stems. Run the other 75% through the crusher destemmer. We just got berries and we mix them together. boom, now we got 25% stems.
Nice. So I imagine if you're a listener and you're saying, "Oh, I wonder what because you can buy table grapes, you can pull the berries off it, you can bite the seed if there's seeds in it, and so that would kind of give you a clue to what you're talking about in kind of a subtle way."
Yeah, consumers, I tell people that all the time. Go home and chew on some stems if you want. It's going to taste kind of woody. That's the tannins. It's going to taste like that. And over a big batch of wine, that adds a little bit. If you do too much, it might be too much. But if you get it down right, it'll kind of hone in, a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah. So I know a lot of people they get confused when they talk about wines being dry and they're not really quite sure what tannins are. Can you kind of take us through the basics of where does tannin come from and how do you feel it in your mouth? And when you talk about dry, what are you referring to?
Yeah, so dryness, a really good question. Dryness, I think for me, definitely refers to just sugar. So is there sugar in the wine? And so what I tell people, at the winery I work at, I also work in the tasting room, and I do this. Your viewers might not be able to see, but I say we start with grapes, and they're super high in sugar. During harvest, people taste them, and they're like, "Oh my God, these are jacked with sugar," and they are. They're super high in sugar, and there's no alcohol, just grapes, just sugar. And once we mash them all up, we put yeast in there, and the yeast eat the sugar and turn it to ethanol. And I do like this with my hands. I go, the sugar goes down and the ethanol goes up. When there's no sugar left, then we kind of say, okay, the wine is dry. At any point on this graph, day 4 or day 5 or whenever, we can stop that and keep sugar in there if we want. I would say most wines do go pretty dry. Right. So that's kind of, dry versus sweet. And then the tannin, that gets tricky because that's more, we say it's drying. It's a drying sensation on your palate. It kind of has that bitter drying. It's not necessarily that there's no sugar. It just kind of, you almost have to like wet your palate again. You're like, oh my gosh, it's drying. It's pulling out all that moisture from your palate. So that's kind of where I go from, different dry to drying of the tannins. And then the tannins themselves, you asked where those come from. Those are just from the grapes. Those are from the skins of the grape. So you'll pick up way more tannins in red wine than you ever would in white wine, just because of the skin contact in red wine. So I explain to people a lot too at the winery that, the only reason red wine is really red is just because we keep the skins in there. It's kind of like you just keep the skins in there and you keep mashing them up, and all that color gets pulled out. Right. White wine, you don't really do. You take them off the skins, and you just get juice and you just ferment it, and it keeps that nice, clean white wine, crystal clear look that you want. So the tannins come from the stems, like we kind of talked about, the seeds that we kind of mentioned a little bit. That's a different tannin called catechin, and then the skins themselves. So kind of those would be like the 3 main areas I would say where tannins come from.
It's cool talking to you because you kind of have the big picture view of wine, the wine world, not only how to describe and how to serve the wine, how to do it with your eyes closed and say, I know this came from the Piedmont or whatever, but you also know the wine making side of things. I guess, people come into the tasting rooms, they just have wrong ideas of what one thing do people say that you just wish they knew more about because it's maybe driving you nuts or whatever?
Driving me nuts. Some consumers can be a little bit arrogant, I guess. That happens. And my take on wine is I try very much not to be that way. I know that I always say to people, nobody knows it all. I mean, there's some people who know more than others, but nobody knows it all. And if you like wine, you want to drink some, that's great. I think that sometimes at the place where I work, we have some interesting wines like Barbera. Consumers, if I had to say, if you had to poll most just regular consumers, they may not know what Barbera is. Right. We make a Barbera, and people say, now what is Barbera? And I always say, now it's a grape just like Cabernet or Merlot. And then sometimes I get that glazed look on their eyes. I'm like, okay, hold on, I need to back up. And then I just kind of go like this. I say, think of like a grocery store and think of all the apples. You can go in a grocery store and you're like, there's Honeycrisp apples, there's Fuji apples, there's Gala apples, there's Granny Smith. I don't know if I said that. There's Red Delicious. There's all these different apples, and it's just the names of them. If you taste, all those apples taste different, and the same thing is true for grapes. There's all these different grapes. Some of the names are a little bit confusing with Cabernet Sauvignon just because they came from France, but it's still kind of the same concept. So I try to break it down like that. I think then sometimes I can see people's wheels who are like, oh, okay, so it's just Barbera. It's just another grape. That's all it is. It's the same as Merlot or Cab or Syrah or Chardonnay. They're just all grapes. They might have a little bit different name, but that's all it is. It's just like Honeycrisp apple versus Fuji versus Granny Smith apple.
I was going to ask, and I'm still going to ask you, but one of the questions I have here, kind of done in advance, was like, how has your wine education either enhanced or kind of detracted from your wine making experiences? And I mean, I can see right there's a little window into your world about how it's really enhanced. You're able to have that communication, that conversation with somebody in a really deep, meaningful sort of way. So I'm just curious, what's your take on that question?
Yeah, I'll answer it. Hopefully this answers your question. A couple of years ago, I felt like I was so, I knew so much about the world of wine. I didn't know everything. Again, nobody knows it all, but I studied a lot. I knew that, co-royalty, I think you can have like 20%. You can have like 20%. That's like the law, something like that. Mm-hmm. Well, because I was studying all that, I was learning all that. That's kind of what I was. Now, since I got up to Walla Walla and I've been focused more on winemaking, I feel like that kind of stuff has not gone away by any means, mm-hmm. but now it's more focused on like the winemaking and the viticulture and how you farm and so it's almost like gotten very, very narrow into this wine making. And I see that with winemakers up here all the time. They're very focused because they want to deliver the best product that they can. Mm-hmm. So you do want to still kind of stay in touch with what's going on in New Zealand and what's going on over there. And, Italy's got some cool wines, but then there's only so much time in the day. So I think, before I knew a little bit about winemaking, but I never really had done it. Now I feel like I'm focusing more on that, the vineyard side, the winemaking side versus what I would call the world of wine, I guess. Mm-hmm. I still love the world of wine. I still love trying different things from across, from Europe or wherever. But then I think that now with the limited time, it's been more focused on here in Walla Walla, making wine here, what vineyards are good, where's everything going, that sort of thing, versus as big as it used to be a few years ago.
Interesting. So you're in Walla Walla. This is kind of a cool place. I mean, Walla Walla, the town itself, is ridiculously cute. I was at the Wine Bloggers Conference back in October and met some industry folks over there as well. And it's, I used to live in Muscatine, Idaho, which is about 2 or 3 hours north and east of Walla Walla. It's a beautiful place, and this place is just. I remember I was in grad school in Idaho back in early 2000s, and we went down to Walla Walla for a holiday, and there was like just a handful of wineries.
Right.
Coming back this past October, there's just an incredible amount of wineries there on the scene. So what is it about Walla Walla that's kind of like blowing up?
Yeah. Good observation, because people around here say that all the time. And I'm not part of the problem, but I guess so. I mean, my wife and I moved here to get into it. So, and there's, like in my class, there's people from Alabama, Virginia, there's people from all over. Mm-hmm. So a couple things. I think that the enology and viticulture program that I'm going through is a big draw. We hear a lot of that. And I would say most of the wineries love it because there's good talent coming out. People are skilled. They know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. I think I listened to your first podcast, or maybe was it the first one with Ashley Trout? And
that was episode 4. Yep.
Yeah. And she mentioned that she's like, this is great because these kids are coming out, or people from all ages and knowing a lot. So I think that's a big draw. And then I think that there's just something to be said for the area in terms of one of the big talks is like the Rocks AVA down in Milton Freewater. That's kind of like a new-ish, I think it was 2015, a new-ish AVA that's really still got some potential. There's, Cayuse is down there, one of the first ones down there producing world-class wine. So I think that's kind of a big draw to the area too. And then from like a consumer standpoint, like you said, it's a cute little town. We're far, I've always thought this, we're far enough from like big cities where it has to be like a weekend trip or a long trip necessarily. It's like you can go and come back. You can't drive from Seattle to Walla Walla for a day and drive back. I guess that wouldn't make sense. So you have to you got to make a weekend out of it. So that helps the hotels, that helps the restaurants, because you get a hotel, you get dinner a couple nights, you hit a couple wineries, and so I think from all that aspect, it's really helping the town as a whole kind of grow. And then there's more wineries, so then there's more people come in, and then there's more restaurants, and then hotels are opening up, and Airbnbs are big, and it just kind of hopefully it just kind of keeps growing that way, because it is such a cute little town, nice little downtown. Right now it's awesome. My wife and I were just driving downtown for everything's decorated for Christmas, so it's a very, very cute little town.
It really is. I love it. So you are going to be a winemaker at the end of this semester, and you're already making wine. You're involved in the business, and you have some big hopes. Tell me about what's your thoughts on your plans.
Yeah, so my plan is that, again, I left, my wife and I left St. Louis a couple of years ago, and I kind of told people, I probably need like 4 or 5 years to kind of figure it out, because I knew about the school program. I knew that was 2 years, and then, let's just say I wanted to make red wines this year, so that would be not this year, 18, but 2019. Let's say I wanted to, find some grapes, source some grapes, make some red wine. I could do that, but you don't sell it right away. You got to let it age in the barrel. It's probably a good 2-year turnaround. So you kind of have a plan of, okay, in fall of 19, we'll make some red wine. Find a place to store it, do all that. In 20, we can make some red and some white. Maybe get some Chardonnay, some Sauvignon Blanc. One of my favorite whites is Viognier. Maybe you get some Viognier. And then in 2021, you do it again. And then maybe in 2021, you can make some reds and whites and open and release with the rosé. Excuse me. And then you kind of release your red from 19, your white from 20, and your rosé from 21. Excuse me. And you kind of get the wheels turning and the balls rolling from there. So that's kind of our plan. That's kind of the hope to do that. There's plenty of good mentors around. What I just said there is a very simplified way to do it. By no means so I think it's that easy.
Right.
Easy, probably everybody would do it, but yeah, I think that it's possible. So that's kind of our plan, and hopefully in the next couple of years have our own winery, have our own label, and just kind of that would be our sole focus. That would be our business. So that's kind of our plan. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I can't wait to come over and try your wines once you get the grapes and ferment them and do. So speaking of grapes, what kind of grapes are you say maybe you're going to focus on red wines initially, at least, and.
Yeah, probably reds initially. I think, this is just my personal opinion, but I think running a winery, you want to do your own things, because you kind of have your favorite things, but you got to listen to the consumers too. You can't be all off in the other, where consumers aren't like, what's going on with this? You don't want to be so esoteric that it's just kind of off-putting. So I'm a big fan of Syrah. I think Syrah and Walla Walla is really doing well. So I would definitely have some Syrahs, and I think, a cab and maybe a blend, something like that. Because there's a lot of grapes being grown here, and a lot of different grapes. Tempranillo's been really good. That would kind of be, I think you want to kind of stay focused. So that would be my guess. With Syrah, maybe made a couple different styles with a red Bordeaux blend and a cab. White, I'm a big fan of Viognier. Chard, and kind of go from there. And then rosé, there's so many rosés around here. Everyone does it a little bit different. Those are always fun too. Cab Franc rosé, Grenache rosés, Sangiovese rosés. They're all, you can make them in any different way. So yeah.
What I love rosé. What I really love about rosé is that when you're pressing your grape red, you can pull off some juice, and then you can get a rosé done before the first of the year.
Yeah.
Then you get some money coming in, at least, that's a nice way of doing it.
Yeah. When I think it was Ashley again who was talking, and she said, rosé is really hard to make because it's like you don't have anything else to blend it with. Yep. You can go in oak. It's you got to get it right from the get go, because if you screw it up, you don't got another batch. Where with red wine you might be able to blend some things away and kind of do some other things, but you don't want to screw up your rosé, because everyone's looking for it, shortly after harvest, and they're gonna be buying it. So
yeah, it's out there naked on its own, and you better be good, right?
Yep.
So we talked about the wines that you're kind of digging. Okay, let's kind of shift a little bit before we kind of finish off here. I'm curious, what wineries or what winemakers are you watching as maybe like these are maybe limited to your region there? or wherever? I mean, just curious, who are you following?
So a couple of, there's a lot doing different things. There's a cool one downtown called Lagana, and he kind of specializes in a lot of different whites and keeping aromatic whites. So I think that's kind of cool. He also does a full Pinot Noir. What else? I'm more interested too. One of my favorites is like Roti. They have nice Roti Cellars, excuse me. They got some nice. They do a Northern Rhone blend with Syrah, a little bit of Viognier. That's really, really pretty. They have a Southern Rhone blend. They have a really nice Grenache too. Revelry is a cool one. They just moved in near where I work, and they got some. They source some good fruit. I think they get a lot from like Yakima, some Syrahs.
Right.
So yeah, maybe that kind of hit a few. And then there's always the classics too. There's always the classics, Pepper Bridge, where you can go and get a nice meaty Bordeaux blend if you're going to have a giant ribeye and you need like a big Bordeaux blend. I would say go get a Pepper Bridge wine, because that'll probably just hit the spot. So we kind of have a new influx, like a couple generations, new generations of winemakers and wineries. And like you said, when you were here way back when, there's probably still some of those classics. Oh
yeah, Fort Geron's still around, and
right. Yep. Woodward Canyon was been here for a while. Some of those other ones that just put out, time will tell, and they put out good stuff for the past 2 decades. So
yeah, I mean, I just keep hearing that people keep talking about Walla Walla. It's just keeps echoing through the people that I listen to in terms of what wines are exciting these days. Okay, you're stuck on here's the big question. You're stuck on an isolated remote island, and you can have a case of wine. What's in that case of wine?
Ooh, so a case. Okay, can I do 12 bottles of wine?
You can do, yeah. Fill up the case. It's mix and match.
Mix and match. Well, I would probably do some of my favorite wines are wines that my wife and I got when we kind of traveled. So we were fortunate enough to go over to Europe, and we went through like Northern Rhone. And Christophe Bion he makes some fantastic Côte Rôtis. He's got some from different slopes, different hills. So I would probably maybe mix and match and fill up a case of Côte Rôtis. I'm a big Syrah fan, with just kind of a splash of Viognier. So those are some of my favorites. So that might be too hot on an island. Maybe I'll throw in like a few rosés to kind of if it's too hot. We're on a tropical island, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, right now it's tropical. It's warm. It's nice.
So maybe like a Viognier or something, or a nice rosé to kind of round out the case, just so that we're not having big reds in that summer heat. But yeah, that's some of mine. So again, some of my favorite wines are always good wines, but then it's also kind of the memory of like, where were we? When did we get this? I think you can sometimes remember like, oh my gosh, that dinner with this wine, it was just fantastic. It's something that goes beyond the wine. It's a little bit more of the experience of when you got it, who you met, the food, all those kind of things that I think are fun to do.
So we're kind of coming to the end of our time here, Drew. Is there anything else we should know about you, or your kind of plans and things that are cool? Or
no, I don't think so. I think I enjoyed our conversation. Like I said, I enjoy wine. I try to always bring it down to people. I think if I drink wine and more people drink wine, that's cool. I really enjoy wine, and I think that I want other people to enjoy it. I don't think that it's ever good to put up barriers and shun people or do anything like that. So I think that's kind of one of my missions, is always just try to have people drink wine. My wife and I, especially back in St. Louis, everyone in the family knows us as like the wine couple. So they're always asking questions, and I think it's always fun to kind of talk with them a little bit and try to get them to try wine. One of my friends just sent me a picture. He's like, "Is this Pinot Noir good?" I'm like, "I don't know. Taste it." How am I supposed to tell you what it is? I'm 1,800 miles away. You taste it and tell me if it's good.
You tell me, right?
If you like it, great. If you don't, we'll pick something else up the next time. I did start trying some more Syrahs, but yeah, that's kind of my kind of philosophy on wine. I enjoy the winemaking side. I enjoy kind of getting my hands dirty in it all, and then I enjoy sitting down, reading a book, and learning about the history and the world of wine too. So I kind of get to lucky enough to do it from both ends of the spectrum.
Cool. Drew Pauk, thank you so much for talking with us today. It's been a real pleasure.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Drew Pauk is a certified sommelier, wine educator, enology, and viticulture student, and works part-time at Savaya Cellars in Walla Walla. Want to connect with Drew? You can follow him on Twitter at DPauk, that's P-A-U-K, and the number 4. That's D, the letter D, P-A-U-K, the number 4. I'll post links on my website and contact information on my theoryofwine.com blog. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Hey wine friends, thanks for hanging out with us for Theory of Wine podcast, brought to you by a new wine documentary called Wine Diamonds, Uncorking America's Heartland, now available online at winediamondsfilm.com and wineryboost.com, influence marketing for the wine industry. Thanks for listening, downloading, and sharing us. Find us at theoryofwine.com. See you next time. Cheers, friends.